Well, well, well. Hello and greetings to each and every one. Very, very loving greetings to each and every one. And yeah, I can actually talk for an hour just to introduce Sister Denise, but I think you want to hear from her. So I'll try my best to be very, very short. Her story is too long. I don't know how to keep it short in 1 minute. She was one of the first one to really start bringing the Brahma Kumaris in Canada. She is certainly one who has impacted the whole Canadian family. But deep within, I think that sometimes without explanation, translation, interpretation, we don't understand what's happening. And I think the virtue of courage is certainly the one that she, among many other, instilled in me. Because so many times I felt like giving up on my journey. And so many times I called Denise and I said, this is too much. I'll never be able to do that. I can't be loving to everyone. I can't do this. And Denise will come up with something totally off the chart and bring me into another dimension so I can understand many other realities beyond the one that was obvious. More than a friend, you've been a sister, you've been national coordinator in Canada for many years, you've been a visionary, you've been someone who has been challenging us beyond what we requested from you. You've been able sometimes to answer a question where it's like a new challenge comes in our lives. But the image I know from you is that when things get entangled and they get very, very like a big knot, and we don't know what to do, you are the surgeon who comes with very special tools, and you do magic with a way of presenting knowledge that can finally untangle or remove those difficult knots.
Shanti, well, thank you so much. And yes, Canada is a very important place in my heart. Well, now, the thing is this, that courage as a virtue is very different from courage as a value. And this is a series on values for life. And so I would first of all like us to look at what actually a value is, because it is very often said, so and so has values and somebody else doesn't have any values. And I think that this may be a bit misleading because values are there everywhere, but values are determined by priorities. And so different people have different priorities, and because of the difference in priorities, there are differences in values. And there is no such thing as universal values, because there's no such thing as universal priorities. And so the first question to ask yourself is, what is important? And Raj Yoga is all about meditation, and meditation to me is deep thinking about what is worth thinking about. And the first thing to think about is yourself. And then when you're thinking about yourself, then you need to identify for yourself, what are my priorities? That is, what are my values? That means you have to ask yourself, what do I stand for? And I think this is where courage comes in, because what you stand for may not be something that someone else appreciates. In all the list of words that we like to show as positive, valuable words, one of them is honesty and integrity. And so one expression that comes with the word courage is courage of your convictions. And once you put it in a sentence like that, then you are really putting yourself on the line. That if you say this and this and this is what I stand for, it will be challenged by circumstances, by people around you, by life. And the challenge can be very scary. And therefore, you need courage, because you have to have a courage in the face of opposition. If there's no opposition, there's no need for courage. So if you have very high principles and you say, okay, I'm a person of integrity and I stand for truth and this sort of thing, then there may be others who say, well, we don't like what you're doing, we don't like how you're doing it, and so we choose to prevent you from realizing your aspirations, we choose to disempower you, we choose to block your way, etc., etc. And so you need courage, because you have to find a way through. Because if you say, this is what I stand for, it means that this is what defines the track of your life. And there you have to see what are your priorities. And I was looking at a documentary a couple of days ago about a very big company in the United States, which was an engineering company and which built airplanes. And their values, their highest priorities were safety and innovation, and they wanted to make the very, very best, safest, most reliable machines so that people could feel safe when they traveled on these extremely advanced pieces of engineering. And as long as these attributes, these values were the priority, then the company was doing very well in terms of how people felt about the product and how people felt about working in the company. But then came some other priorities, which were the stock value of the company. And the company was taken over by another company, and new leadership was installed, and all the priorities changed. And then they wanted to take shortcuts, to disregard safety considerations, and to prevent the public from knowing the flaws in the design of the instrument. And this resulted in very severe fatal crashes and about 400 people killed, purely and simply because of a change in values. And then the head of that company finally, when it all came out, resigned and was given $60 million for, for having killed all these people. So this is really the challenge that we face in the world today, and which requires courage. It's really the courage to say that if you are operating on the basis of your greed, but you want to make it look like you're very good, then you have a problem of hypocrisy. And this is something that requires courageous people, whistleblowers in the case of so many institutions that do this. And what happens to a whistleblower is they will be criminalized, they will be jailed, they will be exiled, and all this sort of thing. And it's a wonder that someone who is doing something because of humanity, because it is correct according to the principles that the majority of people adhere to, but yet because of hypocrisy, when a person really goes down that road and says, hey, you cannot do that, it's a kind of David and Goliath situation. Not even really, because that example is given of courage very interestingly. There's Christian story, it's in the Old Testament, there's a Judeo-Christian story of this young boy who did not have any armor and did not have the regular weapons. He had a slingshot, and he took down the champion of the Orthodox people with one single shot. And so this was not a sign of reckless courage. Sometimes people think, okay, courage is also something that, the odds are heavily against you. But in this story, the odds were actually not against the one who was presented as the weak one, who was actually in a much, much better position to fight that duel than most people believe. And the reason for it is very intriguing. Goliath was a very unusually tall man because he had an illness which made him very large, very strong. And but the problem with his illness is he was short-sighted, so he could only see his opponent who was right up close. And anyone who was a bit far away, he couldn't see. And most people don't know that. And then the situation of David was that he was a shepherd, he was used to looking after his sheep against wolves. And so his ability to take down a wolf at distance with a stone, and in the area where they lived, the stones were particularly hard, so that a slingshot functioned pretty much like a bullet. So he was able to take down Goliath because of taking him from far away and with a weapon that is entirely suited to the situation. So courage is something that needs to be applied very judiciously and not recklessly. So I remember there was something that comes to my mind. I was driving in India, which requires courage anyway, but I was driving on the mountain road. And what happens very often in India is the people who are coming the opposite way to you will drive on your side of the road and not their side of the road. So this is normal, and we get used to it. But the thing is, this was someone who was driving at very high speed, totally recklessly, on my side of the road. And then on my side of the road, if I would move over, there was a very steep drop of many hundreds of feet. And so I said to my passenger, hold tight, I think we can get through. And we did get through with millimeters on either side. And I mean, it's necessary to have courage when you're in a situation like that, because if you panic, you're dead. And if you break, you're dead. You have to go for it. You have to calculate. You know exactly the size of your vehicle and the size of the space available, and you do it. And so I've had a few situations like that. But the most important thing in facing a dangerous situation is you have to be stable and steady, and this is where the yoga comes in. And I think also you have to be unafraid. Usually, this word courage goes along with the word fear. And sometimes people think that fearlessness is a good value or a good virtue. But fear is not something that you choose or don't choose. Fear is a natural, heightened awareness that naturally arises when you are in a dangerous situation. So fear and courage actually go together very well. The thing is, though, that sometimes when a person is in a very dangerous situation and you are having this heightened alertness, but your confidence is missing, and you may panic, or you may try to run away or avoid or freeze. And this is what they say, fight or flight or freeze. And what is needed is you have to calculate the odds and what's possible and do it. And you have a very, very short period of time in which to make your decision. But I think also what you have to do is be very aware of the peripheral circumstances. And I also think you have to be very aware of the laws of karma. And we who study meditation and Raj Yoga, we study the laws of karma very deeply and very carefully. And so we understand how it works. Just as the engineers in the engineering company that I was mentioning, and their priority was safety, so they understand speed and wind resistance and direction and gravity and all of these things. They know the laws of physics, and therefore they can produce instruments that are safe. And if you disregard the laws, then you put people in danger. And I think in the same way, when we're talking about courage in life, we must understand the laws of spirituality so that we can make calculations when we are in front of circumstances that are threatening. And what I spoke about was just a road situation. But life is a road, and every so often you encounter people who will be behaving in such a way that they are in danger if they carry on like that, and they put you in danger. But I think if you live life according to the laws of karma, and you understand how these things work, this will give you clarity and confidence so that you can make decisions to move forward without compromising your integrity. And I think this is a very important thing in life. And when you do this, and you live according to your principles and you have the courage of your convictions, you come across many people who have other priorities. And these may be called hidden agendas. And so, what was the agenda of the people who had taken over that company? Their agenda was greed. And I remember, I think many of the people who are with us today either know or know of Dadi Prakash Mani. Dadi Prakash Mani was the Brahma Kumari's sister who was the head of the Brahma Kumaris after Baba, after Mama, and she was the head for some 30 years or more, 40 years, I think it was 40 years. And so she came into that position unexpectedly. She didn't expect it, although she was perfectly qualified for it. But yet, in terms of ranking, there were others who were of higher rank than her who were expected to be the ones who were identified as the successor, but the responsibility was passed to her. And she is a person who is absolutely honest. And when you have somebody who you watch day after day, night after night, in every kind of situation, and this honesty and clarity and integrity is visible at every step, then you trust such a person and you want to emulate such a person. Her leadership style was really excellent. She was absolutely in her power and at the same time consultative. She did not impose her views, but consulted with all the people concerned when any decision had to be made, so that everyone moved together forward, and the possibility of mistakes and negative outcome was very, very slim because of her qualities as a person. And yes, she had courage. I think one aspect of her courage was that she took this organization from one level, which was fairly small and limited. She took it to the international level and grew it from very small to gigantic, and without any trace of arrogance, but she just understood people and she understood what's possible. She had a vision and she made it happen. And I think especially because she knew God is with her, she's doing God's work, and all that has to happen is move forward knowing that, like, it is done. If you can see it, you can do it. And I think this is also an aspect of courage of the visionary leader. You see what's needed, you see what's the next phase, what's the next level, and you move yourself in that direction, and you make what you can see visible to others, then they can see it, they also move in that direction. But if you're going to be a pioneer, you have to expect that there will be many people who will oppose you and say, this cannot be done, or this is a deviation from the old ways, and we cannot deviate from the old ways because the old ways are tried and tested, even if they're out of date, even if they're completely no longer current, no longer relevant. But many people will just be afraid of something new. They'll be afraid to take that step into the unknown. But when you know the laws of karma, and when you understand the nature of forward progress, then it's not really unknown. You can see it. Maybe other people can't see it. You can see it. So it is clear to you, and you move forward. You take your step into what other people think is the unknown. But for you, it's obvious, it's clear, it has to be done. So you do it. And then they will say, oh, you had a lot of courage. And you will say, no, it was clear it had to be done. We did it. And so you wouldn't call it courage, but other people will call it courage because they would not have dared. So the daring is important, willingness to take a step into something, some area where no one has gone before. And if you're a leader, well, you're not a follower. And if you're a follower, you're not a leader. So the nature of a leader is to go into the unknown. But a visionary leader can see what's needed and what is, to that person absolutely obvious. So now when you are doing this and you're dealing with other people who have other agendas, what Daddy Prakash Mani used to say to people is very interesting. She was not just only a great leader and a great visionary, but she could see right through everyone, and she knew exactly what they were motivated by. And this is an attribute of a person who's completely honest. You cannot be deceived. And so she would tell people, and this referred to the majority of people who she was working with, and she also had to bring them up to a higher level of functioning in the social world. And she would say, you are motivated by a desire for power and position and property and protection. And that's not okay. And it's very interesting, these 4 P's. And ask yourself, are you motivated by a desire for power, for position, for property, and for protection? What does that mean? A person who is motivated by those 4 aspects, it means that they are fundamentally insecure. Because if you have power, it gives you a feeling of security. And if you have a position, it gives you a feeling of security. And if you have property, and if you have protection, But if you are motivated by you want these things, then it means you're insecure. And so what do we know about insecurity? Lack of courage, you see. And so these motivations of people are really a very important attribute of checking within yourself what your values are. What are you motivated by? Why are you doing this? And so one thing that I do for myself every so often, especially when I encounter blocks along my journey, I will do a deep personal inventory concerned with why I'm doing this. Why are you here? Why are you in this practice of spiritual development, which is called Raj Yoga? Why are you doing this? I talk to myself. And why does a person do what they do? This reason why, this motivation is very, very important because it tells you who that person is. So, I'm definitely not motivated by desire for power because, whether I am or not, but I think I'm powerful. So I'm not trying to be powerful. I think I'm powerful. So that's good enough for me. And in terms of position, what is my position? Okay, my position is I'm a soul dwelling in the center of the forehead of this body, and I am seated on my seat of self-respect. That's my position. So I don't need a position accorded by someone, a title or something like that, because this position is actually more reliable than that position, because you could get, taken out of that position any time. And then property. What is the greatest property of all is what we call the third eye. And I remember when I was a very, very young child, when you're a small child, people always ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say, well, I already am. I don't have to become something. I already exist. I am. So it doesn't happen when I grow up. I'm already me. And what I wanted was the third eye. And it's odd to think that a little English child should even know that there is such a thing as a third eye. But somehow I found out about it, and I thought, yeah, if I can get anything, the most valuable piece of property there is the third eye. And then, of course, later on, I came to understand that the third eye is the inner eye of knowledge, the knowledge of the self, the knowledge of the divine, the knowledge of the laws of karma, the knowledge of the ways of the world, the beginning, continuation, and end of the world. This is it, I said, this is the most valuable property there is. And so even if you have nothing physical, but you have this, you're wealthy. And then in terms of protection, what is it that protects us better than anything else is your karma, you see. So if you are, if you have this position, if you are in your power, if you have that property and you function according to what it means and what it says, then you're protected. Another very interesting thing that you learn in spirituality is anyway you're an immortal soul. So one thing that people are really afraid of, along with loss, is, loss of life. They're afraid of death. And when you really go into the depth of spiritual practice and you say, okay, well, if I am an immortal soul and this is my mortal body and I reincarnate, then I need to really look at my relationship with death to find out, am I afraid of death or not? And there are moments in life where you could die, and there are some people, they get what is known as a near-death experience, and a near-death experience could be you almost die but you don't. Another one could be that you actually, do die, like you're on the operating table and you go flatline and they have to bring you back, but for a few minutes you're dead and they bring you back. And so if you have a near-death experience, to me it's really interesting because you can tell yourself, okay, I'm an immortal being, I'm not afraid of death, but you don't really know until you face it. When you face your death, when you have a near-death experience, then you know. And so I had one such, and it was very, very interesting. And it was a drowning experience, and I was in the ocean in a very dangerous situation in a rip current, and but then I had this sense that, okay, I could die. Okay, no problem. But then I thought, it's not time yet. So it means I have to get out of this situation. And so I managed it with the help from the divine. But what it left me with was a very, very powerful experience that I know that when I meet death, it'll be fine because I am not afraid of it. And this type of conviction, I think, enables an individual to be steady under threat or steady under fire because you're really not motivated by fear of death, fear of loss, fear of exclusion, fear of betrayal, fear of the various things that do prevent people from really coming into their authenticity, I think. And people like to be authentic. This is a very powerful motivator. Why does a person do a spiritual practice? Many people say, I want to be real, I want to be authentic, I don't want to be ruled by my weaknesses, my fears, my doubts, and all of that. And I think that to have the fortune of being in a spiritual study and a spiritual practice really puts you right in front of these possibilities, and you have to face them. And once you've faced them and you've taken all these various tests, it empowers you. And when you go into it with willingness, and you look at the odds and you stay steady and you deal with it, and then when you pass through, you have, I think you have become a little closer to the essential self, to the authentic you that you are here for. And, I wouldn't exchange that for anything. Because you see, one of the things about the idea of being an immortal soul is you have to live with yourself forever. And that's a long time. And these other people, you meet them for a few years or a few minutes or a few seconds, but their opinion of you doesn't matter, but your opinion of yourself really does. And if you sell your soul, you always have a certain amount of shame with yourself that you didn't stand up for who you are, and you didn't face the challenge. You capitulated, you took the way of the coward, and then you have to live with that forever. So I am not comfortable with something like that, because I think the most important thing is to not betray the self and to be pure. You see, to me that is purity, and to not betray your convictions, and to not betray your ideals, and to be that. I'm not saying this is easy. And it's very interesting. Before I encountered Raj Yoga with the Brahma Kumaris, I encountered Raj Yoga, and I heard that Raj Yoga is the most difficult thing there is. And I thought, okay, well, that's for me in that case, because if it's easy, it's not worth doing. And then when I came in contact, and they said, yeah, this is Raj Yoga, and it's easy Raj Yoga. I said, forget about the easy part. I'm interested in Raj Yoga, and I know deep down that it's worth doing because it isn't easy. It's it demands you to be real, and it makes you real. I think every single one of us has a few scars from life. There's no way that you could just sail through the difficulties of modern life without getting scarred. But, you can't prove that you're a great spiritual warrior if you don't have any scars. And scars are there to indicate that you're experienced. And this was one very interesting teaching that was given in our study of Raj Yoga, which is an answer to when people encounter huge catastrophes and disasters, which could be personal, individual, or it could be collective, like a big natural calamity or a big accident, something like this. And people have this question. They say, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? And in the teachings, a very powerful statement is it happened to make you strong and to make you experienced. And I took that teaching very much to heart. I said, yes, that makes total sense to me, that whatever happens, however unjust or unfair or whatever, I'm not concerned, because I have this sense that the purpose of everything has a purpose. And the purpose of this is to make me strong and experienced. And if I'm not strong and experienced, then I will not be up for the next phase in my life. So I think all of these things actually gradually build a person's courage. Once you pass through a few things, then something that you think, oh, I can't do that. Too late, you did it. So you can't say that anymore, you did it. And then next one comes along, oh no, I can't do that. Sorry, you did it. And every time you pass one of these hurdles and you cross one of these difficulties, and there's different types of opposition, you find your power, you find your voice, you find your spirit, and you are able to stand up for who you are. You're able to stand up for truth. You don't need to be provocative. You don't need to be adversarial. I think that you can be quietly courageous, which sometimes nobody knows about. Doesn't matter, because you're not doing it for public opinion. It's really between you and yourself. It's between you and the divine. And in the end, that's all that counts. In the end, that's all there is, because ultimately everyone is alone. And this is one of the things that people find difficult to be alone. But I think it's a spiritual truth that you are alone. And going back to Dadi Prakashmani, she used to remind people of this all the time. And she would say, always remember, in Hindi, the word for a banana is kela. So akela is the word for being alone. And she would say, eat 5 bananas every day. You came on this earth alone. You will move forward alone. You pass through your challenges alone. You will die alone. And you are alone. And the only one who is with you under all circumstances is your relationship with God, with the divine. And your karma will go with you. But all the rest is just appears, is there for a while, and it goes away again. And this is one of the very interesting statements in the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, which is very important, a very simple statement. But circumstances, all circumstances are like this. They arise, they persist for a while, and then they pass away, they subside, and then something else comes along. And you pass through everything, you persist. But things, they come, they stay for a while, they go. Nothing is forever except yourself. So all of these teachings done in the context of regular life, they make you strong. They make you come into your power. They make you be who you really are. And that, I think, is where courage comes from. It's built, it's acquired, and it really has to do with you identifying and setting your priorities. This is me, this is what I stand for, and if you want me to go against my principles, you're going to have to kill me. So, but it means sometimes you may have to pay a heavy price to maintain your integrity. But when you pay a very, very expensive price for something, it means what you're buying is very good quality, very powerful item. So I'm always willing to pay a high price for holding on to integrity and self-respect. And thank you very much.
I was just reminiscing about the 4 Ps: the power, the position, the protection, and the property. So, quite a few questions because you were alluding to many spiritual principles. So, the first question is, can I develop courage without connection to the Supreme?
I would think that was not a very wise thing to do, because I think developing courage is about going beyond your capability. And the one thing that makes it possible to go beyond your capability is a connection to the Supreme. You know, God will say to you, I am with you. I am the Almighty. I am with you. You can do it. And then you do it. But if you're by yourself, you may be reckless, or you may just not have what you need. So I would not recommend developing courage without developing your connection with the Supreme, because you are a spiritual being. Don't forget that. Though you can't see your soul, and you can see your body, and you can see the material world, but the laws that operate it are invisible and behind the scenes, but they are real. And your connection with the divine is, I would say, actually indispensable. So, yeah.
These are 2 English words. So, what is the difference between courage and strength?
Well, if you look at the words and even look at them in different languages, courage is to do with your heart. Do you have the heart to do something? You know, and if you don't have the heart, you don't have the courage. And this heart will give you strength. I mean, you may have strength, but if you don't have courage, your strength will be misused or misplaced. Or sometimes people who have a lot of strength, they will use it against people who are weak, and this is a sign of a coward. And nobody can respect somebody who uses their strength against those who are weak.
I think you were mentioning about integrity. That was one. And second was faith. And there's a beautiful proverb or a beautiful quote, I must say, that faith is courage while despair is always destructive.
In our teachings of Raj Yoga, we hear about 4 kinds of faith, which I think are very, very deep and very important to consider. And the first is, do you have faith in yourself? And that's not very many people have faith in themselves. And this is why they need the 4 Ps to prop it up, you see. But they're just scaffolding or crutches, and they won't really work. But your faith in yourself, that this is who I am, and it makes you invincible when you really are connected to yourself. And then the second faith is faith in God, you see. And if you have faith in God, then you can go further than if you were just by yourself, and you feel this extra strength that comes from this sense that God is with me and God is leading me and God is by my side, and that faith is really very empowering. And we have another one which is called faith in drama. We have this idea that everything that's going on is like a magnificent 3-dimensional movie, and that everything in the movie is with meaning and purpose. And whether it's good or bad or pleasant or unpleasant, we have to be in a state of equilibrium in the face of these pairs of opposites, but to know that whatever's going on is carrying you forward. It can be used to your advantage, but you need to be able to interpret it. And if you have that faith that everything that's going on, even if it looks like really the worst thing possible, but behind it, there is something that's carrying you forward. There's something that's carrying humanity forward, and so that you can't despair. And then the other faith is faith in the family. And that is a very interesting one, because everyone, of course, is different. Everyone has good and bad sanskaras. And when you judge people, looking at their weaknesses, and then you criticize and this and that, it means you haven't really understood the value of the family, and that you actually can't do anything alone. And everything that you did, for example, you were mentioning in my introduction, she wrote these books and so on, but I had with me Rose Kelly, who was the person who was the editor, and because we did not put our names on these books, so neither of us became known. I became a bit more known than Rose because she didn't go around and do all the lectures and so on and so forth that I did. But without others, you cannot really achieve anything. And so it is said that, you're standing on the shoulders of giants as you get your achievements. And so we really cannot take exclusive credit for things, because we are part of something much vaster and more complex, but not all of the individuals concerned are visible. But if they were not there, the achievement would also not be there. So we have to give credit where credit is due. And having faith in the family, faith in humanity is really good. And when you have faith of all these 4 types, then you can overcome any waves of despair that want to come up, and you can face those things and say, hey, go away. I'm busy. I've got myself. I have God. I have an amazing instrument, which is called life experience, which is carrying me forward. And I have the family of humanity. You have your people. You are alone, but yet you have so many people around you. And everyone has their very important place in your life. So faith is a very important element. Yeah.
A simple question on a lighter note, that I am a regular meditator and I have the courage to face adverse situations, but I am still very fearful of lizards and cockroaches. So, what do I do?
Well, I think that they are there because there is something in you which you are not facing. I think it's a sign that you are judging yourself too harshly. And lizards and cockroaches are things that repel. And so you may be a person who wants everybody to look nice. And, there is this thing called looking good syndrome. Everybody wants to look good. It doesn't matter if they are good, but they want to look good. And I think a fear of lizards and cockroaches is symbolic for this fear of embracing your dark side. And one of the things that we learn in Raj Yoga is that every soul must pass through the full cycle of births and rebirths, and that every soul has a golden, a silver, a copper, an iron stage. Every soul goes through Sato Pradhan, Sato, Rajo, Tamo, Tamo Pradhan, and you have to embrace your dark side. And if you reject your dark side, then you are only half a person. We have a very wonderful expression that came in our teachings this morning, that you are Swadarshan Chakradhari, you are the possessor of the cycle of the self. That means you have to accept all aspects of yourself, from the lightest to the darkest, from the best to the worst, and embrace yourself totally. And I think that this fear of lizards and cockroaches is because you believe that you have to be all good and no bad. And that is maybe, in my words, I would call that a religious approach rather than a spiritual approach. Because the religion is all about you have to be perfect, you have to be good, you have to be, 100% excellent, and no darkness. But spirituality says, no, you have to embrace the totality from the absolute light to the absolute dark. You have to, because all of it is you. And it's not natural for a person not to have a dark side. And there is this expression, the dark side of the moon. Everybody likes the full moon, and the moon is rotating around the earth, only showing one side, but the other side is there, even though you don't see it. It's called the dark side of the moon. And every soul is symbolized by the moon. So you like to show your good side, but you don't want to show your bad side, so you hide it. But then you become split off from yourself. So you have to be able to embrace the totality of you in order to be free. And so that's worth thinking about.
In the outside world, there is a lot of falsehood which is selling nowadays in the newspapers. And corrupt people are more courageous than people who are truthful. So, how do we explain this paradox?
I don't see any sign of corrupt people being more faithful, more
Courageous, yeah.
courageous than the truthful people. No, they may be more successful, but they're not more courageous. they will pay. The law of karma is so interesting because you cannot get away with anything. And if you are in the practice of spirituality, you have access to the knowledge of the laws of karma more than anyone else in the world, which means that you are far, far more accountable. And I think a very good policy to have for yourself is to expect to be held accountable. And I think that people who are so-called corrupt people they don't expect to be held accountable, but they will be held accountable sooner or later. And if you have this attitude of expecting to be held accountable, that becomes a much higher priority or a much higher value than whatever other things that you are looking for, which requires you to be corrupt.
I'm a doctor and I do my best, and I do best. Even then, patients are sometimes having a lot of negative views about me. So I found it's very hard for me to take that negativity. Any recommendation to develop my courage to face such negativity from patients?
Very often, patients expect the doctor to do all the work and they don't have to do anything. So they will come to the doctor and say, okay, fix me and make it so it doesn't hurt. And a good doctor will say, we're in this together. I can give you recommendations, but you have to do your side of it. And maybe they don't like that because they have this assumption that the doctor has to do the whole thing. But no, your doctor is like a consultant. And a lot of the reason why patients are patients in the first place is because they don't eat the right things and they don't exercise and they don't do their inner work. And when you are in a spiritual practice, you come face to face with this all the time. And I think that it's a question of the beliefs that people have about doctors, is you have to fix me. And the doctor who's a good doctor will say, I will be truthful with you. And people don't like hearing the truth. So I don't know if this is the case for you, but that's how I would look at it.
At Brahma Kumaris, we are taught in these spiritual teachings that you take one step of courage and 1,000 steps of help and support comes from the Supreme Being. So do you want to explain this?
Well, I think everything I told you up until now has been an explanation of this, especially when someone was asking, can you have courage without the Supreme Being, without God? When a person takes a step of courage, it means they have to really stick their neck out and do something which puts them at risk, and they have to do the right thing. It's very expensive to do the right thing. It doesn't cost you much to do the wrong thing. And most people don't know this. They always say it doesn't cost you anything to do the right thing, but that's a lie. It costs you everything to do the right thing. And to do the wrong thing, you can get away with it, but only for so long. And when you kind of understand these things, then you take steps of courage, and God is evaluating you second by second by second. And this is a spiritual law that if you do take a step of courage, you open up the possibility for God to give you 1,000 steps of help. But He will not give you the help before you take the step of courage. And the step of courage is to take this leap into the unknown, to to take charge of your life, to take charge of your situation, and then those steps of many steps of help and support come afterwards. But you have to show that you can do it. Om Shanti.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Allow yourself to go deep within. Feel the power within, the soul, the self. I am the invisible force that operates this body. I am the light. And I am with the great light. An instrument for that light and strength to work through me. I am the essence of love. I care. And pass on the treasures. In this state, I draw strength and I transcend my limitations. My heart is strong, ready to meet challenges. With a light step and a feeling of confidence, even when it doesn't look good what I am facing. I find the courage, and the Great One supports me and carries me across. In the silence, I know that all